and that it is coming out. The episode 4 is almost fully written. It's going to be titled "Going Viral." How much hours on average does it take to make a video? In one video, you literally explain the lore of washing machines so casually. That video sucked to make. As I was writing that, I was like, this will be funny, but it's going to suck. Memorizing those washing machine things was brutal. It took about, I don't know, 10 minutes of saying one set of washing machines over and over before I got a take that I liked. For the people asking what video is that, if you go into my playlist and click on when you watch porn just for the plot, it's the Stuck Stepsister one. Probably took like an hour to get through all those. But, okay, and then how long does it take to make a video? Almost every video can be done, I've done in a day, except for the writing. Sometimes the writing too. But when the script's written out, I can wake up, record, edit, and upload before I go to sleep. With almost every video. There's only been one exception. And that exception was the social network parody. That one, there's so many me's in that video. And you can tell how long a video takes me to make by how many different angles I need, or how many times I need to move the camera. This video is easy because the camera is staying right here. But when I did, for example, the Michael Myers video, you're Michael Myers, but everyone has terrible peripheral vision. That one took about 14 hours of recording because I had to keep moving the camera to the kitchen, to the whiteboard, into the room in front of the green screen. There were so many different camera angles. So the more angles there are, typically the longer the video takes. Writing the script can sometimes be real fast when it's those minute videos, such as when your roommate's a picky eater. I just had to pick different pizza toppings and food. But other times, like the video I just did, the slasher villain fraternity, that took a longer time to write because I had to think of the dialogue. Thinking of just general dialogue can take longer than really quick back and forth punchlines, basically. You've become one of my favorite comedy YouTubers, and I'm curious. Thank you. What's the process you go through to make a video? Okay. So making a video is basically the idea, writing the script, recording, and editing. And then the editing kind of has different parts because editing can be, putting it together, obviously, cutting out the mistakes and all that. But music, maybe zooms or different cuts that make it more comedic. Because making comedy videos definitely a lot in the editing. You can have great punchlines, but if the editing is weird, it could not be that funny. But often thinking of the video ideas is typically the hardest part, just thinking of an idea. As you can, my ideas are kind of random. But I found that I, more often than not, think of video ideas when I'm not actively thinking about them. And this is because I think the creative part of the brain, whatever part of the brain helps me think of these ideas, is like a muscle. In the beginning, I had to flex that muscle a lot to try to think of ideas. I had to actively sit down, think, okay, what's a scenario, a skit, or something relatable that I can do a video on. But now, I very often think of ideas at the gym, in the shower, when I'm watching a movie, without thinking about it. I don't watch a movie and I'm like, okay, what can I make a video on? I will just be watching the movie. Like, I was watching the original Halloween with a friend a few, 2 months ago. And there was a part where he's stalking the main character and kind of hiding out, outside, whatever, the school, the home. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if he does that, but nobody noticed him? And he was just kind of doing it for nothing. That just randomly came to my mind. So I was like, oh, that could be a video. So I think of ideas now more when I'm not actively trying to. And then I always record one person's parts completely. If it's me in a black shirt talking to me in a blue shirt, record all the parts in black, put it into the computer. I don't look at them yet. I come out, I record all the parts in blue, put them in the computer, and then I edit it all. And then after it's all done, if I need to re-record anything, or if I don't like something, which happens a good amount, I will then go reset up the camera and redo them. And then another thing about the process of making these videos is when you do comedy videos, I do a lot of takes now for each line. Every line, no matter what it is, I will say over and over. Because I found out, as much as in my head I think, okay, it's going to be funny if I say it this way, thinking it and seeing it in your head versus seeing it on the computer is totally different. I will think, okay, I want the inflection to be, I want my voice to go high at the end or low at the end. Or I want to look away when I say this, or I want to look directly at the person. All these things that I never actively thought about before, like when I watched movies, I now actively think about. How do I want to say each line? So I say it in a million different ways now. Even if I say the word what, I will say, what? Wait, what? What? Like, I will do it over and over, changing how I look around, changing how I look at the person, how my eyebrows up versus down, everything like that. What would you tell God if you met him? Sorry about the videos. I hope I can still get into heaven. All right, little goblin boy. What have been your favorite videos to film? Personally enjoy the ones about God the most, since it's fun to imagine him like a total bro and not in the usual way people imagine God. I love making those. I think my favorite ones to make are the kidnappers. I love making the one if people in customer service could say whatever they want without consequence. My least favorite are the slasher villains. Although I love, those are some of my favorite videos to put together, to see come to life. But God, the Michael Myers mask and the Freddy mask are brutally hot. The second I take them off, I am just all sweat. You'll notice Freddy has the fewest lines in any video with them. That's on purpose. That mask sucks to wear. It's a really good mask. It looks legit, but it sucks to wear. It's so hot. And then last part of this person's question. Lastly, do you write down your ideas, whichever way you get them, or do you have to film the video then and there out of fear you'll forget them? No, I write down pretty much everything. I have some notes in my computer of just ideas for videos and then punchlines. There are a lot of punchlines I have that I have no idea how they'll be implemented, but they're just there. One example was to catch a frat guy. That video, there's a line in there where I say, after God made you, he became an atheist. I thought of that line weeks before I ever made that video. A lot of people like that line. I did too. I thought of that line weeks before, and I just wrote it down. I was like, after God made you, or after you were created, God became an atheist. I have no idea how I'm going to implement this, but it's a funny line and I'm going to somehow. So I have a lot of those. I'll be writing a video. I'll be writing a script, and I'll look through those lines. I'm like, are any of these lines something that could go in this video in a way that makes sense? What is your favorite line you've ever said in a video? I love the monkey with Alzheimer's looking in a banana for an apple. Thank you. Yes, I like that one too. Favorite line I've ever said. That's tough. I have a few that I really like. That I was like, okay, I'm proud of this line a little bit. Definitely one was the you make God an atheist. I loved, this was not even a line. I loved so much though. I laughed so hard when I actually saw it actually edited together, was entry-level interviews when I just did the SpongeBob laugh. You've seen that video, I'm just talking about programming languages, and then I go off onto absurd programming languages that don't exist. Oh, say, can you see plus plus? And then I just open my mouth and then I put in a SpongeBob laugh. And I just thought that was so funny. Were you a part of a frat in university? I was not. I was never in frat life. The only thing I did in university was Ultimate Frisbee. That was the only real extracurricular I did. And when I wanted to party, I would go to a frat party or go downtown once I turned 21. But no, I was never involved in Greek life. Do you think it's worth starting with YouTube? I've been thinking about making a channel for a while, but just missing that last step to actually do it. Absolutely do it. 100% put content out there if you're thinking about it. Okay? If you don't, in 10 years, you're going to wonder, what if I did? You're absolutely going to wonder that. If you do, even if it doesn't pan out, in 10 years, you're probably not going to say, I regret ever trying. Unless you're putting extremely controversial or bad things out there. But you're probably not. So absolutely give it a try. What I tell anyone who's thinking about starting a YouTube channel or a business or becoming an actor, whatever, it's simple. Do it on the side to start. That's it. Don't drop out of college. Don't quit your job. Don't break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend because you need time to work on. No, just do it on the side. You got time on the weekends? Cool. Spend an hour or two. you got time at night, maybe in the mornings, cool. And if it's worth, like, financially, someone asked me on here, I didn't see in the comment yet, how much I make on YouTube. I'll show you guys on the Patreon. If for whoever subscribes for Patreon, I will in that Q&A video, I will show exactly how much I made on this channel. I'll show you how much I made in December when I posted all 25 videos. I think on Patreon I'll answer questions that are maybe a little more personal, like how much I make or stuff about my life, a little more about my life at least. What sports do you like? Soccer is my favorite sport to play. I don't really watch sports. I don't really have an interest. I tried before. I just didn't care. But I love going to games. It's really fun I've gone to hockey games, basketball, football. But I played soccer growing up. That was my favorite sport. I played basketball for a little bit, and then in high school I ran track and cross country. Ran the 400 and 800. I think my best times were 53 seconds in the 400. And I ran a 2:04, 2:05 in the 800. Even without a vid, you're still funny. Thank you. Did you had in some point in your life the idea to become a teacher? Actually, yes. When I went to my 8th grade, what was that? Not career fair. I had to shadow someone on their job for a day. You had to pick a career you might want, and then find someone who's in that career, and then shadow them for a day. And I shadowed a PE teacher. At the time, I did not know what I wanted to do. 8th grade, like I don't know what I want to do with my life, but shadowed a PE teacher. I've also been a tutor for probably 10 years, like on and off. I was a full-time tutor for 4 years probably, and then I tutored during high school and during college to help just pay for basic expenses. So I've tutored a lot, and I really like it. But after full-time tutoring for such a long time became annoying. You see a lot of stuff as a tutor or a teacher that you shouldn't see. No human should be exposed to. But there are some people that are just really tough to work with, who clearly didn't want to be there, who were not. I don't think people are dumb because they don't know a formula. I don't care if you don't know pi or square. It doesn't mean you're stupid. But there are some people who seriously lack basic logic. And working with those people was awful. Swear to God, this is a true story. An 11th grader was having so much trouble with just the basic math. And I just tried something, like basic fractions. I tried something. And I was like, okay, if I have a cup with whatever, 20 ounces of liquid, and it's half full. There's 20 ounces of liquid in it, and it's half full. How much liquid can the entire cup hold? She had no clue. And it wasn't like she was trying to figure it out. She's like, I don't know. Like, in like the most obnoxious way. So, yes, I have liked teaching, but I've also have not liked teaching. And I'm kind of glad to be out of it, at least for now. Why and how are you so funny? Again, thank you. Okay, so, backstory here. I never in a million years thought I'd ever be making comedy videos on YouTube, or period. Just, I never thought I'd be doing comedy. The first comedy video I ever did was on my Zach Star channel. For those who don't know, I have another channel called Zach Star. It's math, science, engineering stuff, career stuff, but that's a lot older. And it was called Engineering Professors Be Like. So I studied engineering in school, and I had been wanting to do an engineering professor's stereotypes type video for the longest time, and I was terrified. I was so scared. And the reason I was scared was because if you've ever told a bad joke in front of people, or just said something that you thought would be funny and wasn't, and there's some awkward silence and it's really cringe and you want to die. If you've ever had that, the internet would be like that forever. I was terrified of putting out a video, my first ever, just pure comedy, just trying to be funny, and it's just flooded with like, oh, cringe, please don't do this, please stop. Like all those comments you see on people's videos who are cringeworthy and or simply not funny. I was terrified of having, because that's just forever. That's just constant. I would just get those comments nonstop. And I was terrified. So but I really wanted to do it. I thought, okay, I think it will be funny. I just really want to. It looks fun. So I contacted Andrew Dotson, who's another YouTuber who does physics stuff, and he had done a lot of comedy videos. And I was like, do you want to be in this with me? Because in my head, having someone in it with me was like if it wasn't funny, we both take the hits. It's we're both not funny, even though his videos are hilarious. But having him in it with me, I thought, okay, at least it's two of us. We're in it together. I did not sleep that night putting out the video. I was so scared putting it out. I was so excited to read the comments, but I didn't know how it was going to be accepted, and people loved it. It's at 2 million views now. It's been shown in classrooms. I've had people say, our teacher put this on in front of the class, and people loved it. And I was like, oh, it was the biggest sigh of relief that first hour of just reading comments that were just overwhelmingly positive. And then I just got addicted to making comedy videos. I love reading your guys' comments. Seriously, your comments make the videos enjoyable. That it's putting them together is fun, but it's reading the comments. How do you pronounce GIF? I say GIF. Favorite Pringles. Barbecue. How old are you? I'm 29. Outside of Earth 2021, what are some of your favorite video games? Okay, I'm actually not a gamer. I have not played a video game in several years. When I was growing up, I had a GameCube and a Wii and a Nintendo 64. So I played a lot. My favorite game of all time is hands down Zelda games. Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time is my favorite. But I played Wind Waker, Majora's Mask. What was it? Twilight Princess? I think that was the last one I ever played. But God, I loved Ocarina of Time. But I have played a video game in college because I love horror movies. I love scary movies. And because of that, that translates into I find horror video games very fun. So my friend downloaded Outlast, and we played that. We played that like drunk, and it was so fun. I loved playing that game. If you like horror movies but you're not a gamer, you should watch like a streamer play Outlast, and it's really fun. That and Amnesia I played. Do people recognize you outside? How do you feel about it? People sometimes go rather far for their YouTubers. Definitely true. I've been recognized probably 15 times in total now. I would guess a little over a dozen, and it makes my day every time. Everyone who's come up to me is always cool. It's always like, oh, I recognize you from your channel. I just wanted to meet you. Often we'll have like a quick conversation, maybe a picture. Makes my day every time. If you ever see me in public, go say hi. I promise I'm nice in person. Would you recommend going for grades or a higher workload, double majoring, for example, at university? Keep your grades good enough, okay? That's what I recommend to people. If you're failing, then don't take on that higher workload, okay? But if you can handle the higher workload, go for it. I recommend a bachelor's master's combo versus double majoring. Double majoring's probably won't help your salary as much as having a master's degree. That's going to help your resume for real. Do you think your charisma/comedic ability is a born trait, or did you gain it over time? Guys, I'm just so flattered by these comments. I feel weird even answering this. Oh, my charisma comes from like, no. I mean, okay, so the thing about me is I'm actually more introverted than extroverted. And when I say that, it's not what you think I might mean. I don't mean I'm shy and reserved, and I don't like meeting people. When I go out to meet people, I'm just, standing in a corner, and I'm like, no one talk to me. No, I like going out. I like meeting people, and when I do, I talk just like this. I can have a conversation. I can carry a conversation if someone's super boring. But I like being by myself. I live alone. I really like it. My energy is not driven from being around other people. You know those people who need to be in relationships, or they can't sit down by themselves for more than 5 minutes without being like, I'm bored. I need to be entertained by someone. I love being by myself. I don't like being alone, but I can entertain myself. I dive into my work. I can read a book. I can just be with my own thoughts. I have a dartboard, which is hugely therapeutic for me. Just throwing darts, being in my own thoughts. I use that to actually work on videos sometimes. That's like I pace around, throw darts, and just kind of let my mind wander. So that's kind of like therapeutic for me. But no, I absolutely love that. I don't need to be around other people at all to have a good time. But writing comedy, I think, has been a developed thing. I think I'm getting better. I think videos are improving over time. I don't think they were terrible in the beginning, but I think they've just gotten better. So I think, and that comes from going through with the videos, writing them, acting them out, and then seeing them done. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. Seeing it done is different than doing it. It's going to look one way in your head, and it's going to look another way on the computer. So seeing that and saying, oh, okay, it's actually funnier when I say it like this is a developed skill that just comes from doing it over and over. So I think that has definitely improved. How is it you do your sponsorship messages so fluently? How is it you seem to have integrated your sponsors into the comedy in and of itself? That's a clever technique that I'd be interested in learning about. You got to have one of the characters need the product, or have it be something they would use just in some way. I feel like that's kind of the technique I go for. Like I have Keeps. Keeps is asking me to do a video for them, and I will. You know, the hair loss video. I have no idea how I'm going to incorporate it. But in my mind, here's some thoughts. I have like, okay, maybe I can have a character say something about stress. Like, hey, don't do this or you're going to get stressed. Your hair might fall out. But hey, if it does, boom, Keeps. Like something like that. What do you enjoy making more, math videos or skits? Good question. So I would say making videos-wise, skits. Because at the end of the day, it's both kind of busy work. Math videos are really fun to research, but I love when I make skits and I export them. I don't have to fact check. I don't have to make sure, oh wait, did this make sense? Sometimes I export and then watch a math video and I'm like, wait, I'm even confused by my explanation. I'm gonna redo that and try again. Skits, I don't have to do that. It's just, was it funny enough? Okay, good. Then it's going to YouTube. What's your favorite video that you've made? Oh, okay. So in terms of like, not the process of making it, but just my favorite final products, ones that I would show to people probably who are seeing my channel for the first time, assuming they have a sense of humor similar to mine, would be when the kidnappers get the wrong person, when they kidnap Brittany, the slasher villain support group. I love putting that one together. I love the idea of making the slasher villains very religious because it is true. That's what I loved about that. It is true in the movies. They always kill the person who does drugs or has sex. So I love doing that. I loved how that one came out. And then when God attempts No Nut November, I was cracking up when I was finally watching him steal food from the people who were praying. I just love seeing that. So, yeah, I think those are my top 3. All right, then I think I'm going to end that video there. I apologize if I did not answer your question. I didn't answer all of them, but I answered a lot. Check out the Patreon page for another Q&A.
New for the series, as they have always had to place trackers on ships, but now only need to find them and it's over. Since this scene could have been cut, the only real purpose it actually serves, aside from showing the raw power of Snoke, is to humiliate General Hux. Again, which means his character is almost retconned now. Hux was once of similar standing to Kylo. They had a new dynamic. In the OT, Tarkin was superior to Vader.
Enough of this. Vader, release him.
As you wish.
And every other officer past that was subservient to Vader. This connection in The Force Awakens was new. This was a clash of officer and Sith. Hux was actually set up to be an interesting foil to Kylo, and vice versa. We could have developed a competitive nature as well as providing a reason why Kylo restrained physical retaliation on Hux. Perhaps Hux had a relative with power, or he held something over Kylo, or maybe he had power that he had not shown.
The mission have no problem retrieving the droid. Unharmed.
Careful, Ren. That your personal interests not interfere with orders from Leader Snoke.
Regardless, this choice was a real shame.
What failure have you ultimately learned the most from?
Great question.
Do you have enough time for this? Starting with this answer. That's it. May the Force be with you.
Finn then wakes up and we get 3 jokes right out of the gate. He hits his head on the medical scanner, he falls out of his bed, and he's leaking fluids while walking around until Poe finds him. Finn then asks for Rey, which is in line with his character as he cared more for her than perhaps himself, and was injured trying to protect her. The sad part of this is that there is nothing permanent from Finn's injury, nothing to remember or learn from. He was put in a coma by a slice to the spine, only to wake back up. It is almost completely pointless looking back. Is that Abrams' fault or is that Ryan's fault? I think it's easily understood as Ryan's fault because it's a setup that was completely removed. Is it a subversion? Of course, I didn't expect a spinal injury to have absolutely no repercussions, but then it receives merit by simply being unexpected. That's how this film works, right? Regardless, we finally get to see Rey. Rey is seen right where we left her, providing Luke Skywalker Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. And we have a very strange moment straight from Rian Johnson that tells you so much about his perspective. They play a soft theme to get the viewer in the moment, taking off right where the previous film left us. And then it rises in tension, only to climax with Luke flimsily throwing the lightsaber off a cliff and walking away. This is what I would describe as tone deaf. Others describe it as subversive. Either way, let's get into this. Why was Luke standing there? Why is he already so angry? Why did he just comically throw the lightsaber? Were we meant to be taking this seriously? The scene now feels as though we're supposed to be laughing, and those two tones are heavily conflicting while providing a strong confusion for Luke and his character. If Luke looked down and simply allowed the lightsaber to drop from his hands and then he slowly moves away, that would be one thing. But to very deliberately throw it in such a please laugh now manner is jarring. I know many people don't understand why I'm working hard with this point, but it will become clearer as we move through the video. Luke is different. Luke tries to hide from Rey by retreating into what we assume is his home, but Chewie bursts through the door and the first thing Luke Skywalker says, angrily, to Chewbacca, after who knows how long it's been, is, "What are you doing here?" Rey then translates Chewie for Luke, which is insulting to Luke as a character. Either the writers forgot that the man has clearly known Chewie for roughly 30 years and Rey would know this, or they simply don't care. Either way, it comes across as a blatant misstep in understanding the characters at hand in order to translate Chewbacca for the audience. Luke then asks, "How did you find me?" Which, if you only watch the movies, you'll barely know how to explain to your family or friends how the map to Luke came about and why it was even a thing, but Rey says she'll explain on the Falcon. This is absolutely Episode 7's fault. I don't blame 8 for that. Now Luke knows the Falcon and Han Solo are almost inseparable and so asks where he is. The camera then slowly zooms towards him, only for the film to cut to Kylo Ren in an elevator. They do not allow us to see Luke Skywalker react to the death of Han Solo. Instead, we only have Leia on her own, with Finn and Rey at the scene in the first film. This is so beyond insulting. The emotion we get from empathizing with these characters and their struggle is what binds us to them, to be with them when they fail, and to admire them when they succeed. To steal Luke's realization that his best friend of countless years, his sister's lover, his nephew's father, the man he went to war with again and again, the man who'd saved his life many times, you didn't let the people who love Luke Skywalker feel that pain with him. That is such a terrible choice as an editor, as a director, but first and foremost, a lead writer.
And I say, because it would carry so much emotional resonance into the next film. For us, his wife, his best friend to witness, instead of two characters that have known him, what, 20 minutes?
Too bad that Luke and Leia can't rush to Han Solo's side. I mean, we won't be reunited, and we'll still be too late to save him, but at least we have some history between us so that when he dies, it has a tragic element that resonates into the next film.
So we are now with Kylo Ren, and he's going to visit Snoke, who tells Kylo that he keeps someone like Hux around because he can manipulate him, implying heavily within the scene that he feels the same way about Kylo. Snoke shares that he is no longer confident that Kylo is the Sith he saw in him long ago, and demands that he take his mask off, because the mask is ridiculous. Kylo says that he killed Han and didn't hesitate whatsoever, only to be criticized by Snoke for losing to a girl who had not been trained. The scene ends with Kylo destroying his mask and demanding a ship. It is strange to suddenly see Snoke in person. You would expect a bit of an entrance like Darth Maul or the Emperor, but never mind. It is also strange that we get no information about finishing Kylo's training, but we do get Snoke insulting Kylo for wearing his mask. Kylo has been wearing his mask in meetings before and has previously been wearing it for a long time. It was shown as a strong part of his character, his image, an image that he crafted in order to strike fear into those around him, and it was working. His overcompensation did exactly what he wanted.
The Resistance will not be intimidated by you.
Where is it?
And now Snoke insults him, and he stops wearing it? Kylo's had several scenes with Snoke wearing the mask previously, so why is he picking on it now? And what is more important is that The Force Awakens gave us a very clear example of how much Kylo does not like to be seen without his mask. Now that's all gone. This just seems rushed. The insults for his costume should have come from the enemy, having Poe or Rey insult him about his overcompensation, as it would make for an intense development. It shouldn't be the guy who's seen him wearing it for what is potentially years. This just muddies the relationship between these two and makes it hard to figure out why Kylo even follows Snoke if all he does is humiliate him. Kylo is known to respond badly to controlling and belittling figures, but he's okay with it when it's Snoke? It just would have been great to get a better sense of the relationship between these two. This is something that the prequels did quite well with Anakin and Palpatine. It wasn't perfect, but it showed a lot of why Anakin and Palpatine managed to stay as close as they were all the way until Vader and the Emperor.
The Death Star will be completed on schedule.
You've done well, Lord Vader.
Rey then asks Luke to come back and help the Resistance, and he has this line to say back to her. Do you think I came to the most unfindable place in the galaxy for no reason at all? Go away. If you need your character to say they're in a place that's hard to find, don't use a word like unfindable. It sounds like a child wrote it. Luke should be saying things like, the most remote part of the galaxy, or do you think that I came to the best kept secret in the galaxy so that I could be followed? Lines like this, words like unfindable, can often raise an eyebrow in the audience. On top of that, hearing Luke Skywalker so sheepishly utter go away was actually distracting to me. What is going on here? We are then provided the milk chugging scene that fans are so distraught over having to see, and maybe this requires explanation. Luke Skywalker was an impressive piece of cultural iconography, a man who despite all odds and trials pulled through and led the charge on saving the world from a terrible evil. He did this while saving his father from darkness and became a great hero to Star Wars' universe and our own. We've not seen this man for 30 years, and the first thing he does after being introduced is flee from the call of duty in order to rush to some morbidly obese creature and chug down its juices after milking it right from the nipples. It isn't that this doesn't make sense or doesn't suit the location and narrative at hand. It is simply a question of why. Why are you putting one of the most iconic childhood and adult heroes, a legendary warrior, an inspiration for millions, in the dirt and having him suck on the milk of some sweaty creature? Why? What does this add for the audience? I suppose it answers the question of where Luke gets his sustenance, because there's no other way of doing that. But is it necessary? Such a bizarre scene, it already sets a strong precedence for events moving forward.
He is so significantly important to this next film. You have no idea.
Well, that's good to hear.
Luke then catches a fish to further answer questions about his source of food, and Rey shows us that she's holding a device in her hand. Luke then catches Rey while she's in the Jedi Temple that's inside a tree, and wants to know who she is. They then have a back and forth, and Luke goes from this extremely gruff, no-nonsense disheveled man to cracking a joke here and there, commenting on how nobody is from nowhere, but Jakku is indeed pretty much nowhere. So now we are left to wonder if Luke is actually just being difficult since he clearly is able to engage in levity, or is this just an attempt to keep the script from feeling too dull? Rey then says she needs him to teach her, and Luke replies that he'll never train another generation of Jedi and that they need to end. This is a major shock to the audience. Luke Skywalker is telling us that the Jedi need to end. Luke has now created a huge mystery and there is a blatantly large gap in his development. What made this happen? We then see Leia recovering from the loss of the majority of the Resistance fleet, and the scene moves her into slapping Poe. Poe argues that you should always finish a mission that you start, and Leia responds that not every problem is solved by jumping into an X-Wing. We then see the twin device to Rey on Leia, and it's explained that it'll allow Rey to return to the Resistance regardless of their location. Suddenly, Snoke's fleet arrives, consisting of his personal ship, the Supremacy, and several Star Destroyers. Before they make a jump to hyperspace, Leia points out that it's futile as they would just track through hyperspace, which Finn says is impossible. So the plan instead is to fight back and keep moving. Poe moves to the hangar bay while Kylo Ren and his men begin to bomb the ships. Kylo is firing a weapon that apparently goes straight through shields. This allows him to decimate the hangar bay with just 2 missiles. As much as this is now an established universal rule, it is not a wise one. If all that you need to destroy an enemy hangar bay is one fighter firing 2 missiles, then this would be occurring in every battle on both sides. We have seen fighters enter the hangar bays at great risk in previous movies, as well as Anakin destroying a ship from the inside in Phantom Menace, which does not make a lot of sense either. Seriously though, introducing this torpedo option will now have to happen in every film past this one, or it'll need an explanation of why it's not. Not to mention we'll have to wonder why it didn't happen in the previous films. The reason it's actually happening is because Rian Johnson didn't want the Resistance fleet to fight back in this instance. He wanted them cornered and subsequently chased. He also wanted Poe Dameron to be stuck without his X-Wing. There are far better and less obvious ways to make this happen. Leia then commands Admiral Akbar to bring the ship out of range of the Star Destroyers, and this will pull the fighters back. I don't understand why the fighters would pull back if there is enough of them, because they would simply swarm and destroy the ship. Surely. In addition, if the First Order can track the Raddus and its location to a T, then why not park very close to them so they can't outrun your ships before you destroy them? I don't understand how the Raddus outpaces Star Destroyers. Why aren't the First Order ships faster? Why can't they simply light speed ahead and cut them off? They have several Star Destroyers and backup. These questions will not be answered because this is setting something very specific up. Kylo's men then destroy the bridge and Leia is killed. The fact that the bridge is vulnerable to TIE fighters now, as well as the hangar bay thanks to these amazing missiles, makes it extremely hard to care about future battles, since these rules are ridiculous and they're going to have to be thrown out the window whenever someone wants to have drama in a space battle. Who wouldn't open a battle by sending their troops to each hangar bay and bridge on every single cruiser before a fight begins? It is a huge advantage, and so there are better ways to write this stuff if you actually want it to happen. There are better ways to have Leia killed, and there are better ways to prevent the ship from leaving the cruiser. It is completely rushed and convenient, and is made clear when Hux calls Kylo back immediately after the scene, since if he was to stay, all of us would wonder why he's not destroying the rest of the fleet. The reason is that the First Order cannot cover their fighters from this distance. Hux's second-in-command makes a statement about this. They are faster and lighter, but they can't lose us. They are at a range where our cannons are ineffective against their shields, but they won't last long burning fuel like this. That is one hefty line of dialogue to explain the movie. Yes, this line explains the movie. We will now have every plot roll around this central conflict, so let's discuss it. The First Order's goal is to destroy the Resistance. To do this, they need to destroy the remaining fleet. To do this, they need to get in range of their ships in order to fire their cannons effectively. These cannons are ineffective at long range, and so they cannot destroy the Raddus unless they are closer. There is no reason for this. The cannons simply behave this way. Since when do missiles or lasers in space lose their effectiveness over distance? Especially that short of a distance. On Earth, we have bullet drop, we have wind resistance, but you do not have that in space. Regardless, the First Order does not lose their distance despite the Raddus being described as faster. There is no reason for this, they just don't. Some have commented that the pilot would have set the speed to simply outrun the First Order narrowly, as anything more is unnecessary. This is a neat explanation, but it is not provided by the movie. Now, if this really is the problem, then why aren't the First Order sending their other Star Destroyers through hyperspace to get ahead of the Raddus? There is absolutely no reason this isn't happening. It's not mentioned, they just don't do it. But what about the fighters? We saw them destroy the bridge and the hangar, right? And we know that there are bomber-class fighters designed to take a beating and attack the cruisers such as the Raddus, right? Where are they? Even the TIE fighters are able to punch through the shields, but the First Order can't release them due to the fact that they'll be destroyed without cover. They don't explain why this is suddenly an issue, and it never has been before in a Star Wars space battle. It simply is an issue now. Can you name me one time where a commander was actually concerned about fighters being destroyed? Remember that the Resistance has no active fighters scrambled because the bay was destroyed. This sets a rule that surface cannons on the side of the Resistance can hit the First Order fighters, but the First Order surface cannons cannot hit the Resistance fighters. There is no explanation for this. It is simply how it works. On top of that, since when is fuel an issue in Star Wars? Not that it can't be, but they've pulled this out of nowhere in order to create a conflict. Not only that, but why, when running out of fuel, would you slow down? On Earth, we have bullet drop and wind resistance. You do not have that in space. This is horrendous writing on so many levels, and many claim that you are simply looking too deeply into it when making these observations, because it is very clear that the film is dismissive of all of this itself. This is a terrible perspective to try and have. The film itself is trying to explain many of the elements away. It'll have a full line from the commander to try and explain the plot. It's just badly done. Perhaps with more time and skill, it could have been done without the holes being present in almost every element of the setup, but it wasn't. Not to mention that the people who say that, the next time that you have a problem with a film, just think of you saying that to other people. Regardless, Rian Johnson wants to tell his story, and he has now made huge exceptions in order to have it happen, not to mention taking massive leaps in logic. This is the most common criticism of Star Wars fan fictions. especially those in their first draft. So, taking all of these things into account, we have our framing for the story. There is a slow speed chase through space with the Resistance and the First Order, and the Resistance only have a limited amount of time on their side. We then see Leia waking up in space. She makes her way back from the ship and is promptly put on a stretcher. When she does this, she drops the link to Rey and Finn picks it up. This scene is extremely controversial as Carrie Fisher died between production and release of this film, meaning fans have it squarely in their minds when viewing it. Most assumed this would be her exit from the series, but it would seem that this is untouched as a scene from before to after Carrie's passing. The purpose of this whole thing is to put her out of commission and bring in Admiral Holdo, who acts as an antagonist to Poe. But they did this in such a bizarre way. We had no clue that Leia could use the Force in this manner, and that is what we're assuming saved her. Many have said that she trained with Luke over the time that we haven't seen her. This explains surviving and the fact that she can force pull herself to safety. But the film did not show us that. The film did not have a character discuss it in passing or blatantly. All we have to go on is Luke saying that Leia has power in episode 6.
You have a power I don't understand and could never have.
You're wrong, Leia. You have that power too.
This isn't Deus Ex Machina, this is just insulting to the audience. Here is something that you would never have guessed to essentially resurrect a character you were sure to be dead. It makes sense because she would have trained under Luke during the 30 years. Like I said, there's nothing to suggest this at all. A conversation with Luke about her having power does not equate to rigorous training with a Jedi Master in order to survive the vacuum of space. Stop writing the script for him.
That's not how the Force works.
But for the sake of the argument, let's assume she does have the power and the training required to survive this. Is it a force field? Well, no, because Leia is shown to be frosted when she comes back aboard. In that case, how did Leia survive the vacuum of space? How did she survive the pressure? How did she survive the moisture evaporation? How did she survive the lack of oxygen? How did she survive the temperature? How did she move to the airlock? How did she open the door? How did she get back into the ship instead of being blown back out and taking several people with her? In addition, she couldn't save her colleagues? She let them all die? She let her dear old friend Admiral Akbar die despite his decades of service? I have heard the argument that when a person is in great peril, they will oftentimes have a strong boost of adrenaline, and when you do this for a Jedi, it will give them very impressive power, almost acting as a boost to her force powers. This is ridiculous. Please stop. All of this is terrible. Plenty of things are either butchered or forgotten by Rian Johnson in order to have his scenes, and it's such a shame. We aren't meant to think about any of this, we're only meant to feel about it, as if emotional investment and immersion are not conducive to each other.
It's unexpected, the way it turned out. No, I'm going to go back to sleep, thanks.
Chewie is then seen trying to eat a porg in front of other porgs, and it's played for cuteness and laughs. I know that everyone else is aware of the purpose of porgs within this film, and scenes like this only serve to highlight how utterly sad Chewbacca's existence in this film is. He is meant to react to porgs. He doesn't even speak to Luke beyond being shouted at in the opening scene, and past that, he's the driver of the Millennium Falcon.
All right, pal. I'm all right.
We then see Luke take the dice in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon and meet R2-D2 after all this time. Mark Hamill, for just a moment, is allowed to play Luke Skywalker in this scene. He shows a sense of surprise, happiness, and reverence for the droid, before sinking back into his new character. R2-D2 plays the recording of Leia that we all know so well from the original film, and this prompts Luke to action. This scene is one of the only few that I can actually describe as pitch perfect within the film. Irrelevant of the context, the pieces were all there, the elements were nailed, though it is so sad to think that this scene is following Chewbacca having a laugh with some animated bird bears. Luke then says to Rey that he will train her, and the purpose will be to explain why the Jedi need to end. And then we go back to the fleet. It is explained that Leia will now be inactive until the writers deem it time for her to return, as the force power that allowed her to survive space was only good enough to get her into a coma that lasts a few hours. This is why it's so hard to accept. The force has no limits, while also being restricted. Keeping it simple, keeping it to force pull, force push, force lightning, mind tricks, it was also very understandable. But now it can make protective layers around you. And this isn't even necessarily with training. The film doesn't tell us why any of this is going on. This is why people do not want it to be canon, because it is changing or outright breaking rules, which is striking directly at our investment within the media itself. And on top of that, the Force can... Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself just yet. We will get to that. So despite all those issues, Rian Johnson wants Admiral Holdo to be in charge, and so she is. Holdo says the remaining Resistance members are the spark that will light the fire that will restore the Republic. And I am left to wonder if we would even want the Republic. Considering it was wiped out in minutes and had literally no presence in the universe regardless, why does anyone care to rebuild it? Again, the world development, it just makes this line so hard to swallow. Holdo also says that Admiral Akbar is dead. He was blown out of the ship along with every other major Resistance leader. It would seem that Rian Johnson was told that the second in the trilogy is the heroes at their low point, and so he decided to simply eject a bunch of characters into space. But this begs the question of just why did you have Admiral Akbar in the movie if you were just going to kill him like this? What is the point of him being in this film? Did you really resurrect a fan favorite meme generator just to murder him off screen after a single line of dialogue? Admiral Holdo then tells everyone to man their stations. The character herself is picked on by many for wearing a ball gown and dyeing her hair purple in this film. Now this shouldn't matter all that much because ultimately it is just a hair color and her attire. But the mere fact that so many people have pointed it out should give you an idea of how annoying it is. Why is the Admiral wearing a ball gown? It seems so inefficient and disrespectful. Why does the Admiral have purple hair? What is the point of that? I've heard the counter-argument that in the novels supporting the series, Admiral Holdo would dye her hair regularly when she was a young age, so this makes sense. Again, something that the film does not provide and pretends is normal, despite us very rarely seeing anything but natural hair colors on our characters. Poe then comments on the fact that he's heard of Holdo and her past, but he's never seen her before. This would be believable if not for the Resistance being an incredibly small amount of people. Anyway, after Holdo's speech, Poe asks her what her plan is after explaining that the fleet is in massive danger. She responds very dismissively and asks him about the word plan, as his plan with the Dreadnought has cost the Resistance their fleet. Before I go into the comment she's making there, I want to point out how utterly clunky this dialogue is. Poe asks what the plan is, and she says, "Plan? Like the one you had?" Poe did indeed have a plan. It was not perfect, but why is this even being discussed? Just answer the question. He is your fleet commander. People respect him. Despite his demotion, nobody else is currently in his place, so tell him your plan. Why did you deflect to this criticism of his methods? Why aren't you behaving like a normal human? Unless she doesn't have a plan, and she's stalling. Maybe she's a double agent. Regardless, this dialogue does not flow. The reason the comment is strange outside of etiquette is that since the bombing fleet was so horribly designed, taking out the Dreadnought was a miracle. Atop of the fact that if they hadn't, the Dreadnought would have destroyed them all by now. And then combo that with the fact that if they had all light speeded out, their entire fleet would be picked off right now because the bombers would be useless. The Dreadnought, the Supremacy, the Star Destroyers, and the fighters would have easy pickings. Finally, in hindsight, Poe made a decision that saved everyone's lives, again, as he has done several times, so stop treating him like a child. This scene is not only an example of poor dialogue, it is filmmaking 101 in terms of setting up a villain. We love Poe, or at least the film hopes we do. He is the hero from the first movie, and a POV character, so when a character so brazenly obstructs him and treats him like a child, we are left to wonder why, and we are naturally pointed in the direction of her being evil, or at the least the antagonist. But it's not over. Poe practically accepts responsibility as well as his diminished rank in what is a sad display of a hero taking a fall for no reason, so that he can ask modestly, what is going on? Holdo then replies, "I have known many trigger-happy flyboys like you. You're impulsive, dangerous, and the last thing we need right now, so stick to your post and follow my orders." Once again, where does this kind of response come from? If you genuinely believe that about Poe, then why keep him in the dark? Wouldn't that be the worst thing to do for someone who is impulsive and trigger-happy? What nonsense is this? Holdo biting Poe's head off needs an explanation. She's almost definitely the villain at this point, but that will simply be a moment for us to think about. The film then introduces Rose. Rose is the sister of the Resistance fighter that died in the successful bomber, and so she is mourning her death, which is incredible to think about. A character we have never seen before is mourning another character we only saw once, and neither have had any dialogue, yet we didn't see Luke Skywalker mourn Han Solo. Let that sink in. Rose then catches Finn trying to escape and explains that she's a big fan of him as he is a Resistance hero. Considering this movie took place directly after the first, I don't know how the legend spread, but that's fine. Rose explains that she's been taught by her sister to never run away and that she has to subdue many different people who've been trying to do just that. She's been crippling and capturing people who are trying to save their own lives. Has she been sanctioned by a higher-up to do this? Are people not allowed to leave the Resistance at will? This is never discussed. It's almost as if she is doing this regardless of moral implications or orders. Anyway, she catches him trying to escape and zaps him with the taser. When Finn comes to, he tries to explain that the resistance is going to crumble any time now and he doesn't want Rey to return to this mess. She simply calls him a cowardly traitor. Then Finn explains that they can't escape and that the First Order can track them, and this turns the conversation around completely. Rose now wants to help Finn find a way to deactivate the tracker, and Finn devises a plan to do it. I was under the impression that Finn simply wanted to escape, run from the First Order and protect Rey. They are his drives, but now he's going to go on a wild bantha chase trying to sneak past the First Order and disable their tracker, which isn't possible until he goes to Canto Bight. This sounds as though he wants to do everything he can to protect the Resistance now. On top of that, this shouldn't change that he was a deserter just now, but Rose doesn't seem to care any longer. She's only concerned with taking this coward up on his offer to try and disable the tracker, even if it involves taking a ship and jumping to hyperspace, which is exactly what a coward would want. Not to mention that he says he used to mop the breaker room for the tracker on Snoke's ship, which means that Finn knows about the tracker. So why did he say that tracking through hyperspace is impossible earlier? For those who say that there are no plot holes in this film and that you don't understand what they are, that is a plot hole. Besides, I thought Finn was situated on the Starkiller base, not Snoke's ship, as they stated in The Force Awakens. You're telling me that Finn happened to mop the only room we currently need to know the location of in a ship we weren't aware of until this film began? This scene, like the previous one and many others, is an absolute mess. None of this is making sense. It's not following a through line, and more questions keep popping up. The script is hemorrhaging. It needs a script doctor, someone to repair the things that are falling apart, as well as someone who is fluent in the lore of the saga, rather than have to demand the audience not to think about any of this. Following that, they tell Poe about their plan. Poe suggests blowing up the Star Destroyer with the tracker on board, being the Supremacy, but Finn says they can't because the First Order would simply start using the tracker on another ship, and therefore they need to disable the one that they are actually using and hyperspace out before the First Order realize. This is because it takes 6 minutes for the First Order to have a system cycle which would reveal the sabotage. As if destroying the Supremacy is just something they could do if they wanted. Poe literally just says, oh, you know, we could destroy the Supremacy, and Finn says, I like what you're thinking, but that's not going to work. How are you going to destroy the Supremacy that easily? How? Not to mention that this means that the First Order has many functioning trackers but chooses to use one instead of coordinating information from multiple trackers. There is no reason for this. And I may be getting ahead of myself here, but there are also no guards on the breaker room, despite it being singularly the most important piece of equipment in their arsenal, in terms of destroying the Resistance. This is also not explained. Poe is very happy to hear about this plan, as you would expect, so he asks Rose and Finn where they met. Rose says it was just luck, and Poe replies, oh yeah? Was it good luck? Why would you ask that? Why would anyone ask that? What do you expect people to say? Why is he saying this? Rose then responds, she isn't sure if it's good luck yet. This line explains why he asked the question in the first place, because it sounds deep. At this point, the script is almost too far gone to bring back. The intentions of the writer come before logic and consistency, with the goals of the scenes being laid bare. You are going to be taken to locations and you're going to witness events well before you understand why it could possibly take place, because the visuals come before the story. Anyway, C-3PO says that Admiral Holdo will never agree to the plan, and since she has now been established as a villain, Poe decides not to tell her, which is one of the few things that does make sense in this script. For now. Also, C-3PO no longer has a red arm. There is no reason for this. I assume that Rian Johnson forgot that it was red for no reason before, though for as long as it lasted, I'm sure it sold a lot of toys that were distinguishable from the OT and the prequel C-3PO. Like, seriously, I'm not even, I'm not even bothered by this. It's just so shallow. Anyway, it's not over. Maz Kanata is played by a half Kenyan, half Mexican actress by the name of Lupita Nyong'o, who was celebrated as a casting choice that promoted diversity along with Captain Phasma, Rey, Finn, etc. And since this sequel is taking place with a fleet chasing another fleet in space, there is no way to get her into this film, because Maz Kanata is located in some cantina on some planet, so it's impossible. Right? Finn says the entire plan they just came up with point by point is worthless, as they can't get into the ship because of its shields. It is actually bizarre that it took this long for him to stop in his tracks and consider this. They've been constructing the plan for ages and he has not brought this up yet. But then Poe decides to call Maz. Why? Did we even see Maz and Poe talk to each other in the other movie? Why wouldn't it be Finn? Is this like a legitimate mistake in the script? Did they forget who met Maz in the first film? Or is this supported by a novel where Poe and Maz are friends? Anyway, Maz is displayed to them on some kind of 360 video call, which isn't explained in any way, but why bother at this point? And Maz explains that she can get them in, but she's too busy with a union dispute, so she recommends using a man she describes in detail and trusts dearly to the point of making a sexually charged joke. Then she literally blasts off and out of the scene and out of the film. Maz Kanata literally pops up for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I honestly think that this is a diversity quota thing. They had to have her have a scene in the movie. There is no other reason why she's here other than to provide a piece of information that turns out to be absolutely useless in the grand scheme of things. Finn then gives Poe the homing device, and this implies to the audience that Finn is doing all of this to save Rey from coming back to the fleet, which is now more in line with his character and more clear. But what is it that we know in totality? The First Order is chasing the Resistance for reasons as we have dissected previously. The fleet must escape. In order to do this, they have to jump to hyperspace. In order to do that, they have to disable the tracker on the lead ship. In order to do that, they have to disable the breaker on the lead ship. In order to do that, they have to break into the lead ship. In order to do that, they have to get the master code breaker. In order to get the master code breaker, they have to go to Canto Bight. And in full, the code breaker information is to go to this obscure planet we've never heard of before and find the man at the high stakes table wearing a white suit and a red rose lapel who is essentially a master at everything because Maz is unavailable. We assume he's simply going to help them out of knowing Maz. This is what it means to be convoluted. The story is now complex and extremely difficult for children to follow despite them being the target demographic. This is on top of the mistreatment of the many characters, the rising unnecessary conflicts, the absolutely abhorrent dismissal of universal rules, and humor that serves to eat up many of the scenes and their atmosphere. The script is irredeemably mediocre, and we are only 45 minutes into the movie.
In fact, I want to do movies now where I don't do anything, I don't talk, I get second billing, and, you know, I'm in the movie less than 30 seconds.
Then we move back to Rey as she contacts Kylo Ren through what we can assume is the Force. Kylo says that this can't be Rey's doing as the effort would kill her. She says he will pay. She's clearly grieving for Han Solo, and again we are disjointed tonally by suddenly having a series of frog nun monsters making funny noises. I genuinely find it baffling that Rian Johnson places extremely lackluster sources of humor in places that are meant to be taken seriously, but he seems to just keep pushing it as if it's some kind of perfect formula. Perhaps the more bothersome part to this, however, is that we're shown grief from Rey. She's talking to Kylo in reference to the murder of Han Solo, and we have Luke Skywalker in the background asking about the hole in the wall she just created, and then saying in an almost humorous tone, "What's that all about?" Every scene with Luke is a constant reminder that the man who should be broken from the death of Han Solo is chilling out grumpily in the background, commenting on the environment while Rey grieves for Han Solo. So Luke begins his lesson with Rey. She makes a comment about how the Force is something that makes things float and allows you to control people, and Luke disagrees. He has her sit down and meditate after explaining that the Force is in everything and binds everything together. He tells her to reach out, and is disappointed that she tries to do that with her hand, and so tickles her with a reed and tricks her into thinking that it was the Force that was doing it. The problem once again is tone. We have this extremely self-contained, self-centered, angry hermit man who begrudgingly accepts to teach Rey about the Force. He is doing that solely to let her know why he will not teach her anything and that the Jedi must end. And then we get some funny jokes. It does not have a consistent flow. How do you want your audience to feel, Ryan? We can only be thankful that we didn't have R2-D2 slip and fall over a porg in the scene that he reunited with Luke, since I'm sure that would have been in the deleted scenes. Rey then talks about the duality of the Force, that she can sense the pro and the con of all the elements on the island. Luke has her describe the Force and then tells her that it does not belong to the Jedi, which is a line I can get behind in terms of development of the lore, but then Luke says, "To say that when the Jedi die, the light dies is vanity. Can't you see that?" This line doesn't make sense at all. It came out of nowhere. The Jedi are the opposing force to the Sith. To quibble about whether the Force is still around if the Jedi aren't is one thing, but he is demanding that we embrace the light without the use of the Jedi. The obvious problem here is the Sith didn't catch the memo. For any of the faults the Jedi have, as well as why Luke has turned his back on them, they have a tendency to fight the Sith, which is incredibly useful when you have mass-murdering psychopaths like Kylo Ren and Snoke running around. If Luke wants the disillusion of the light side and the dark side to bring a new thing, fair enough. But removing one side, the side that happens to be positive, is not going to make everything work out. Not to mention that he should know this very well considering his time in the original trilogy. Is he happy to let the Sith just take control of the galaxy and kill the people he loves? Anyway, Rey gets a very sudden approach from the dark side. She says it's cornering her, and Luke tells her to resist it while echoing her name. This is an emotional moment that could have been incredible in a developed story, but this just happens so suddenly. We've had, what, 40 seconds of training, and Luke has already had a moment of seeing Rey's darkness. They got to bond over one tiny joke, and we're already moving along. Luke says she didn't even try to resist the darkness, and Rey responds that she couldn't see Luke, and that she figures out that he has closed himself off from the Force. I have no idea what this means, but I suppose it explains why Luke couldn't feel Han's death. As for whatever else it means, we'll have to allow the film to do its thing. Luke responds to her by saying that he has only seen this kind of raw strength in Ben Solo, and that it didn't scare him before, but it does now. I mean, is he saying that Rey and Ben have more power than Vader now? I don't know, moving on. Finn and Rose leave for Canto Bight, and many have pointed out that Finn is the one who is piloting the ship, despite them making it clear that he cannot pilot a ship in The Force Awakens.
You need a pilot. I need a pilot. Can you shoot? Blasters I can. Okay, same principle. We need a pilot!
We've got one!
You! Use the toggle on the left to switch between missiles, cannons, and mag pulse. Use the sight on the right to aim, triggers to fire. This is very complicated.
This is just another mistake in continuity. Or there's an autopiloting feature going on here, but the film was too lazy to explain that, so you're not going to catch me doing the work for the film. Immediately after that, Rey comes to talk to Chewie, after asking him to tell her once the Resistance contacts them. But once again, because there is nothing else for Chewie to do, the film has him play with porgs. Rey then connects to Kylo once again, this time calling him a monster, and Kylo agrees with her, giving her reason to figure out what that might mean. The film also shows us that Kylo has rain on his hand due to the connection, implying that there is some kind of physical presence. It's also a neat detail that Rey enjoys the rain while she's outside, since she's from a desert planet and hasn't seen that amount of water, let alone it falling from the sky. And this is the kind of thing that shows me personally that this film had potential, a lot of potential. Finn and Rose then arrive in Canto Bight. Rose comments that the place is filled with the worst people in the galaxy, perhaps a reference to Obi-Wan's famous line about the Mos Eisley Cantina. They are then immediately caught out for parking in the wrong space, which will be relevant later. Canto Bight is basically a casino planet filled with creatures that are all fat, disgusting, crazy, and weird, while dressing like royalty. Or at the very least, Hunger Games royalty, and there is something sinister going on underneath it all. After BB-8 is used as a slot machine by a local, Rose explains that the First Order took everything from a mining planet that she and her sister grew up on, taking their resources and using their land to test their weapons. She then says that the men and monsters we have seen previously are all rich thanks to selling weaponry to the First Order. Again, with the tonal split of silly BB-8 jokes and suddenly harrowing tales of death and destruction, but oh well, more of this soon enough. Immediately after that, Finn and Rose are captured and placed in jail for parking incorrectly, just as they found the master codebreaker, as Maz Kanata described. Both of them are jailed without sentiment or a time frame because of a parking violation. Right. Also, is it not weird that they left the fleet as soon as possible once they found out about the codebreaker and they headed to some random planet, and it happened to be the perfect time of day to see the codebreaker in his element rather than sleeping or on vacation or even eating? He's just right there. Lucky. Rey is then seen practicing with her weapon, and she decides to use Anakin's lightsaber instead while accompanied by her theme, which is wonderful to listen to, by the way, even if it is only for a few seconds. Luke then begins to watch over her as she loses control and slices the rock that she was training with in half to see it fall down on top of the locals. This is probably the only joke that actually landed in a way that made me laugh out loud, simply by virtue of the expression on these creatures' faces. But had they been any further forward, she would have killed them. So it's still a little bit off for me. Rey then goes to talk with Luke, and he explains that Jedi are now deified even though their true legacy is failure, citing that at the height of their power they allowed Darth Sidious to rise and wipe them out, as well as Darth Vader being trained and created by a Jedi Master. Rey then turns the conversation by reminding Luke that he saved the galaxy from Vader by turning him back to the light, and he is a Jedi. Luke refers to himself as a legend, then explains the 30 years of history we've all been waiting for. Luke trained Ben in a temple along with many other students, and then he saw darkness within him. One night he confronted him, and Ben buried Luke under a structure. When Luke woke up, his temple was in flames, and his students either left with Ben or were slaughtered. Luke then says he failed because he was a Skywalker. A legend. That's it. That is our full history aside from a tweak or two.
And if you think you're going to go into the movie and recapture your childhood, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
It's time to discuss something very important. As you may very well have noticed, I've been showing clips of Mark Hamill and his journey throughout interviews with the press. There is a strong through line that he doesn't like the way Luke was handled in this film.
I'm in awe of the entire cast, and aside from Daisy, I look forward to working with them one day.
Oh, we can't end on that note, can we? I'm afraid we have to, because that is all we've got time for.
Nor did he appreciate how he was treated even as far back as The Force Awakens.
I got a phone call. You're not on the poster. I said, fine, it's just another in a series of humiliations.
I have a massive amount of respect for this man and his clarity when voicing his opinions on Luke and his goals in life of bringing joy while maintaining respect and a form of dignity. He has a strong investment in his work and stays light in most of his appearances to best represent an aged Luke Skywalker to the world. But my point here is that he has a lot of fun.
I hate to admit, when I became a Pez dispenser, I ran into Harrison's dressing room and I said, Harrison, I'm a Pez dispenser. And he looked up and he said, whatever floats your boat.
He looks like a soccer ball, and he's got the rotating little dome on top. He's adorable. And then you just make it in that sinister dark color with the flat edges on his dome, and immediately, Nazi!
He honestly seems to value one thing more than anything else when it comes to Star Wars, and that is made very clear here.
It's just so wonderful to be associated with something that makes people so happy.
And to be associated with anything that brings people that much happiness is just a real gift.
And so we have a problem. Luke is a completely different character. Not even the people who love the film disagree with this. The defense always amounts to yes, but it still makes sense. But does it?
There is good in him. I felt it. He won't turn me over to the Emperor. I can save him. I can turn him back to the good side.
We gotta help her.
They're my friends. I gotta help them. I have to try.
Get off my island.
Does it make sense that Luke Skywalker would give up on training Jedi he worked to resurrect? Does it make sense that Luke Skywalker would give up on the Jedi as a whole despite what he learned about the balance and the actual history that took place in the prequels? Does it make sense that Luke Skywalker would give up on the galaxy he fought so hard to save? Does it make sense that Luke Skywalker would lose every one of his character traits that make him the figure that millions looked up to? Does it make sense that Luke Skywalker would give up on his family? That Luke would abandon them? Does it make sense that Luke Skywalker became a fearful coward, a hermit man, a tired, grumpy, old, damp sock, asking that we allow him to run away so he can be alone and die? Maybe we shouldn't be asking whether it makes sense. Let's ask Mark what he thinks.
When I read 7, I said, I love everybody's part except mine. Imagine how I felt, because I'm reading this thing, everybody's talking about me all through the movie, and then I get to my part and I turn the page and it says the end.
Yeah. Did your vision and Ryan's vision, did it coincide with the way that Luke ends up in this film that you thought it would all these years later?
No.
No, not at all.
It was as shocking to me to read what Ryan had written as I'm sure it will be for the audience.
I said to Ryan, I'm so surprised how you see Luke. I was shocked, because I said to Ryan, number one, Luke was the most optimistic, hopeful character, and now he's this miserable, despondent hermit.
Now you've seen in the new trailer, Luke says it's time for the Jedi to end. That's terribly shocking.
Yeah.
I thought, I don't want to go there. I want to be the optimistic, hopeful one like before.
What?
Yeah.
Luke was the most optimistic, hopeful character, and I had a real, sort of a back and forth with Ryan. I said, Ryan, a Jedi doesn't give up.
I remember you saying that,
A Jedi, if he does something wrong, he makes it right. Even if he's traumatized and goes away, he regroup within, 6 months, but I don't believe a Jedi would ever give up. You see, if he makes a mistake, he doubles down and does the right thing, regardless of the magnitude of his mistake. Who is this guy? How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit who says it's time for the Jedi to end? I read that and I said, what? I mean, that's not what a Jedi does. I thought I was a nice, nurturing, in my mind, I was a great uncle to Ben Solo, and I feel tremendous guilt that I wasn't there for him. I used to be the orphan discovering hidden powers. Now we've got this one. I used to be the hotshot, impulsive X-Wing fighter. Now we've got Oscar. I used to be the one sneaking around enemy territory in disguise. Now we've got Rose and Finn. So, I had to fight the irrational urge that it's a bunch of strangers rummaging through my old toy box playing with my toys. I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker.
Luke has been gutted and poached in order to function as a springboard for the new heroes. He is the husk they will emerge from. Rey is better than Luke. She is more powerful, more morally righteous, more ambitious, more thoughtful, kinder. She's everything he should have been. But Luke actually earned those traits. And now they belong to her, for free. No training, no tests, no trials, no tribulation. Luke has been provided a very classic case of character assassination. And it's devastating for longtime viewers, because not only is it something that we don't want to see, but it is given no meaningful or developed reasoning. None of this makes sense.
I remember thinking, when I got to the scene, I hope everyone's seen it, but when the lightsaber jiggles in the forest and flies out of the snow, I went, oh, baby, here I am. Goes to Rey. I'm saying she didn't even do any training. What's going on here?
What is going on there? 'Cause she didn't do any training.
Well,
How could she possibly stand up?
Well,
she hasn't even been to Dagobah for training.
what's the deal? I know, everyone said,
Mark has since tried to pull back on his comments as they are functioning as a springboard of their own for fans to rally behind, comments he only meant to make as an expression of his feelings, and it's caused massive splits in the fan base as well as vitriolic comments and tweets. Mark's tweets are often referenced as evidence that Mark loves the new film and the direction it takes, but after seeing each of the interviews, I think in the spirit that he wants people to be happy, he is simply trying to calm the storm, calm everyone down, despite his own personal disdain. You can see him in moments of great stress and anxiety across the internet, but there is one interview that is very telling to me. It almost tells a story of Mark Hamill and Luke Skywalker. Mark isn't simply attached to Luke because it's a great source of financial stability. He loves what he and the character brought to people all over the world. Joy and hope. Wonder and escapism. Happiness. And so when faced with this new direction, the dark, gritty, depressed, sallow coward, there aren't many ways to feel about it other than the need to get away from it. So during this clip, Mark is once again veering off into his own thoughts, and we can only speculate what they might be about in this Star Wars related interview. Regardless, this interview is between Mark Hamill and Britain's own Simon Pegg. Simon Pegg is a massive original trilogy fan, and as they discuss the topics at hand, watch Mark slowly fade off and away until he is reminded by Simon Pegg of why Luke Skywalker is so important.
But I've been a fan of Mark since I was 7, so
right, there you go.
And you know, he was such a huge part of my life growing up and part of my, you know, development as a person, because that, I know it sounds crazy and it's weird when people talk about things that you've done as being so influential and you know, having such an effect, but Star Wars had a big effect on me, you know, and I always was Luke in the playground. I was always, you know, he was always my favorite, and so to meet him on that first day, I remember you came in and you were like, you know, you were sort of on set saying hi, and I think I went up and hugged you straight away.
Really?
It's that odd thing, I know you, I've known you for 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing about this, is that you become a part of the world's family. And I'm so moved by stories of people that were inspired, people that really are facing like health issues and adversities, that find determination and spiritual redemption. I'm always stunned at how it affected people and continues to affect them.
This is pretty devastating, because who wants to play as the old grumpy man on the island who wants to die? Who's going to be inspired by that? Not Mark Hamill, I can tell you that much. The other reason people think he's walked back on his statement is that his arm would have been twisted by Disney. But we have no reason to assume that, do we?
But you'll find out more. I don't think anyone will ever say, that's exactly what I wanted. And I better be careful, by the way.
I had to do what Ryan wanted me to do because it serves the story well. But listen, I still haven't accepted it completely. I mean, if I leaked something, they'd cut off my head and throw it right in my face.
Seriously though, I think he's walked back on them to try and keep the peace. The man does not want to cause or support pain in any way. And besides, should we take him seriously on Twitter?
I mean, it's only a joke, you know. Don't take me seriously. I'm just another crank on Twitter.
See what I mean? He's just fun, and he was forced to play literally the opposite of that. Anyway, the fact that Luke has been butchered as many iconic characters have been with every reboot that gets released, plenty of people still like the direction, but regardless of how they feel, regardless of how Mark feels, regardless of how the world feels, I feel like it was a terrible decision from a man who had a fan story to tell, and no one could convince him of anything different because he had the final word on the script. As nightmares do sometimes come true, that fanfiction is now canon. Thank you for watching part 1 of my series. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know this is intense, it's long, and it's packed with... Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is part 2 of a 3-part series of videos called A Critique of Star Wars The Last Jedi. I don't want to waste your time, so make sure you've seen part 1, and then we can get right back into it. After the destruction of Luke Skywalker's character, Rey says to Luke that she will not fail him as Kylo did, and we transition back to the fleet. The medical frigate runs out of fuel and slows to a basic stop compared to the Raddus. Ryan, this is space. This is not Earth. Momentum. The First Order is then in range to destroy the frigate. We've been over why this doesn't make sense, you know, the whole chasing thing, and the reason all of this is happening right now, in this scene, is to remind the audience that there is danger here, because many viewers would be forgiven for thinking that nothing is actually happening in this chase. An additional note here is that everyone was so convinced that tracking through hyperspace was strictly impossible. The thing is, we already went through Finn's memory being a plot hole, but what about everyone else? The movies have shown that you can track through hyperspace, you just need to have a tracker on board. Leia knows this as it literally happened to her in episode 4.
They let us go. It's the only explanation for the ease of our escape.
Easy? You call that easy?
They're tracking us.
And at the same time, she has a device on her wrist that will allow Rey to track her through any distance created by, I don't know, hyperspace. This is information that everyone is fully aware of. The possibility is always there, but nobody wants to scan the ship for any devices. No one assumes that maybe the First Order captured Rey and is using her device to chase them. There's no discussion. They simply assume correctly. The First Order have a tracker that once it's in range of a visual on another ship can be used no matter where the enemy goes. Such incredible writing. Admiral Holdo bids farewell to the pilot of the frigate who says that everyone has been evacuated before going up in flames. Why did he stay on board? Why couldn't he be evacuated? If there was piloting work needed to be done, why not a droid? Why not an autopilot? We never have answers for this. Admiral Holdo then says to stay the course despite being 6 hours from fuel loss and causing massive amounts of stress for his subordinates. Poe witnesses this destruction, and at this point, the audience is probably safe to assume that Holdo is actually performing sabotage. On top of this, the Raddus is being chased by more than 10 Star Destroyers. These things release huge squadrons of TIE fighters, send about 100 against the hangarless, defenseless ship, and you will destroy it. In fact, please do that. I actually want the First Order to win at this point, and they hobble themselves all the time to prevent that. Of course, the fact that they have that many TIE fighters is never going to be addressed in this film. The only argument I've heard of is that Hux wants to sadistically run them out until they lose fuel, and any other option wouldn't interest him. But the people making this argument forget that Hux said, "What is the point of all this if we can't blow up 3 tiny cruisers?" In response, his subordinate explains why this is the case, and then, accepting of the compromise, Hux says, "Well, keep up the barrage, they won't last long." Hux wants them dead at all costs as soon as possible, for his own satisfaction as well as the appeasement of Snoke. There are so many additional methods many viewers have thought of that slip the mind of the entire First Order to destroy the Raddus. At this point, it's simply humiliating for a lead writer on a multi-million-dollar project to have missed every single one of these. Back at Canto Bight, Finn and Rose are placed in their cell, desperately wondering how they're going to reach a codebreaker, as well as how they're going to break out of prison, only to discover that there is a competent codebreaker in the cell with them. He opens their cell door and walks out, leaving the escape option for Finn and Rose. I'm going to run through this set of scenes before talking about them. The codebreaker bumps into BB-8 as the droid takes down several guards with his coin machine gun. The film makes a point to not be violent with this machine gun, just damaging so all the guards fall over and go to sleep, or they're tied up. Either way, the point is that the guards have been taken out of the equation, so do not ask questions about them. We then see Finn and Rose have ended up in the pen for the horse-like creatures, and the film makes a point to show their wounds from the jockeys we saw them sustain earlier. Rose releases them and convinces the child labor to let them leave without incident by saying they fight for the resistance. We then cut to a truly chaotic scene where Finn and Rose ride the horse animals to freedom while crashing through many structures all over Canto Bight. It bears mentioning that these animals really do seem like rip-offs of The Last Guardian, and that's unfortunate considering how recently that game was released. Then sentry helicopters chase them and say they're not going anywhere. Despite that, Finn and Rose evade them successfully by splitting off from the main group. Unfortunately, they both reach the cliff's edge and realize that they are trapped. This is where Finn says, "It was worth it though, to tear up that town, make 'em hurt." Rose responds by releasing the animal and saying, "Now it's worth it." Moments later, the codebreaker flies his ship to the cliff's edge and offers to rescue both of our heroes, supply them a transport back to the fleet, and help them break into the First Order's ship and take down the breaker in the breaker room for the tracker. Now let's rewind and break this down by character and then by plot. Rose, upon being released, goes through a grate with Finn to avoid the guards that came after the codebreaker met up with BB-8. So I guess these new guards just didn't see the codebreaker, nor were they alerted to BB-8 taking down the other 4 guards. That's fine, it's just interesting logistics, I guess. Rose then releases all of the animals in hopes to free them and comments on this being what makes the whole thing worth it whether or not they escape. This is so silly for a grown adult to say. Those creatures, because of how cute and helpless they are placed higher than human life by Rose. She doesn't care to free the slave labor and provide them a better life with the resistance, even though they are sympathetic to the cause and help them with their plan. Not to mention that, as we learn, they are force sensitive, meaning they could be a huge help once they've grown up. Though I suppose I don't know what force sensitive people even means anymore, considering this.
How Rey has the Force.
Everyone has a force. Even Hux.
Is that true? I thought some people could have the Force and some people... I need to watch the movies again.
So everyone has the Force now. It isn't special by definition.
And when everyone's super, no one will be.
So yeah, Rose doesn't have a second thought about the child slaves, but this is even sillier due to the fact that Canto Bight is a planet filled with massive over-the-top security, likely because the place makes a massive amount of money. This means that all those animals that her and Finn have released will be captured and put back to work. This is obvious, as what else would happen when that many sentries are all chasing the targets when they've been shown to have weaponry? They aren't shooting because they're trying to catch the animals, and it's only a matter of time before they do. Which is dumb in itself, by the way, as they cause more damage to the world and grief to the guests than I'm sure they're worth, but whatever. What Rose has said here is akin to a child's outlook on animal cruelty. Just free them all, let them return to their homes. It is very likely that they can't even survive in the wild, that they've been born and raised in captivity. None of this is handled with a lick of realism, and considering this series is being looked at as children's content despite the incredibly deep themes and the violence, what is it that you think this teaches children exactly? Free animals no matter what? Stop mean things from happening? If anything, this will simply give children the wrong ideas. Moving on to Finn, he is mostly along for Rose's ride, but he does comment on the destruction of the casino as a sort of revenge against the people who run the planet, the rich war profiteers. Now this is actually childlike writing again, a glossed view of the world where the bad guy loses because we broke his toys. Finn accomplished the destruction of many areas of Canto Bight, scaring and injuring citizens or tourists while labeling them all as evil as he trampled through without any specific information on any of them, only to claim the revenge he apparently sought. What a great character. An easy comparison for this is the sad realization that by destroying the Death Star, Luke may have killed many innocent stormtroopers conscripted for the sole reason that they were unlucky and didn't believe in the Empire at all. Who knows? This is inevitably going to happen in order to stop this planet killer from completing its goals. Here though, he is just rampaging through a random city on a planet under the justification that he doesn't like the people who live here. What about the good people who are here? What about the slave labor that may be serving these people as you trample through? What about characters just like you and Rose who are here to find something? It is so interesting that a character who's established as unable to stomach human suffering is so blunderously carving through a complex filled with humans causing suffering. It is almost like there is no care taken with the characters in this film. But that's ridiculous, right? The carnage is apparently justified by some of these people having profited from war. Do you understand what that means? They didn't cause the war, they simply profited from it. They aren't even strictly evil on the scale. They're just opportunists. Besides that, as a disgruntled sanitation worker for the First Order, Finn should know well and good that when something is damaged in the Starkiller base, or the Supremacy, the mess is not cleaned up by Snoke, or Hux, or Kylo Ren. It would be sanitation, engineering, plumbing, or a specific section of people that work. Perhaps a slave group. Real people like Finn clean up the messes that he is making right now, and he should know this. Not to mention that this may have no real effect on the rich, horrible people of the world because they have insurance. But what does that matter? We know they have slave labor, so they're just going to use them. Thanks to Finn, there's going to be months and months of whipping and ridicule, all so that he could feel better about these evil men who rule this world. People feel like this whole sequence was a moment for Finn to grow and learn in relation to the evils in the world, while in reality it was an embarrassing cavalcade of virtues being sprayed across a disconnected and clumsily constructed plotline. Finn's new and idiotic attitude is the similar kind of attitude that many misguided activists have in our world today, freeing animals only to scare or hurt them, or ultimately
This is a transistor. It's one of the most important devices ever to be invented. So we're going to learn how they work in detail in this video. Transistors come in many shapes and sizes. There are two main types, the bipolar and the field effect. We're going to mostly focus on the bipolar version in this video. Transistors are small electronic components with two main functions. It can act as a switch to control circuits, and they can also amplify signals. Small low-power transistors are enclosed in a resin case to help protect the internal parts, but higher power transistors will have a partly metal case, which is used to help remove the heat which is generated, as this will damage the components over time. We usually find these metal body transistors attached to a heatsink, which helps remove the unwanted heat. For example, inside this DC bench power supply, we have some MOSFET transistors which are attached to very large heatsinks. Without the heatsink, the components quickly reach 45 degrees Celsius, or 113 degrees Fahrenheit, with a current of just 1.2 amps. They will become much hotter as the current increases. But for electronic circuits with small currents, we can just use these resin body transistors, which do not require a heatsink. On the body of the transistor, we find some text. This will tell us the part number, which we can use to find the manufacturer's datasheet. Each transistor is rated to handle a certain voltage and current, so it's important to check these sheets. Now, with a transistor, we have 3 pins, labeled E, B, and C. This stands for the emitter, the base, and the collector. Typically, with these resin body type transistors with a flat edge, the left pin is the emitter, the middle is the base, and the right side is the collector. However, not all transistors use this configuration, so do check the manufacturer's datasheet. We know that if we connect a light bulb to a battery, it will illuminate. We can install a switch into the circuit and control the light by interrupting the power supply. But this requires a human to manually control the switch. So how can we automate this? For that, we use a transistor. This transistor is blocking the flow of current, so the light is off. But if we provide a small voltage to the base pin in the middle, it causes the transistor to start allowing current to flow in the main circuit. So the light turns on. We can then place a switch on the controlling pin to operate it remotely, or we can place a sensor on this to automate the control. Typically, we need to apply at least 0.6 to 0.7 volts to the base pin for the transistor to turn on. For example, this simple transistor circuit has a red LED and a 9-volt power supply across the main circuit. The base pin is connected to the DC bench power supply. The circuit diagram looks like this. When the supply voltage to the base pin is 0.5 volts, the transistor is off, so the LED is also off. At 0.6 volts, the transistor is on, but not fully. The LED is dim because the transistor is not yet letting the full current flow through the main circuit. Then, at 0.7 volts, the LED is brighter because the transistor is letting almost the full current through. And at 0.8 volts, the LED is at full brightness. The transistor is fully open. So what's happening is we're using a small voltage and current to control a larger voltage and current. We saw that a small change to the voltage on the base pin causes a large change on the main circuit. Therefore, if we input a signal to the base pin, the transistor acts as an amplifier. We could connect a microphone which varies the voltage signal on the base pin, and this will amplify a speaker in the main circuit to form a very basic amplifier. Typically, there is a very small current on the base pin, perhaps just 1 milliamps or even less. The collector has a much higher current, for example 100 milliamps. The ratio between these two is known as the current gain and uses the symbol beta. We can find the ratio in the manufacturer's datasheet. In this example, the collector current is 100 milliamps and the base current is 1 milliamp. So the ratio is 100 divided by 1, which gives us 100. We can also rearrange this formula to find the currents also. We have two main types of bipolar transistors, the NPN and the PNP type. The two transistors look nearly identical, so we need to check the part number to tell which is which. With an NPN transistor, we have the main circuit and the control circuit. Both are connected to the positive of the battery. The main circuit is off until we press the switch on the control circuit. We can see the current is flowing through both wires to the transistor. We can remove the main circuit, and the control circuit LED will still turn on when the switch is pressed, as the current is returning to the battery through the transistor. In this simplified example, when the switch is pressed, there are 5 milliamps flowing into the base pin. There are 20 milliamps flowing into the collector pin, and 25 milliamps flowing out of the emitter. The current therefore combines in this transistor. With a PNP transistor, we again have the main circuit and the control circuit, but now the emitter is connected to the positive of the battery. The main circuit is off until we press the switch on the control circuit. We can see with this type that some of the current flows out of the base pin and returns to the battery. The rest of the current flows through the transistor and through the main LED and then back to the battery. If we remove the main circuit, the control circuit LED will still turn on. In this example, when the switch is pressed, there are 25 milliamps flowing into the emitter, 20 milliamps flowing out of the collector, and 5 milliamps flowing out of the base. The current therefore divides in this transistor. I'll place these side by side so you can see how they compare. Transistors are shown on electrical drawings with symbols like these. The arrow is placed on the emitter. The arrow points in the direction of conventional current, so that we know how to connect them into our circuits. To understand how a transistor works, I want you to first imagine water flowing through a pipe. It flows freely through the pipe until we block it with a disc. Now, if we connect a smaller pipe into the main one and place a swing gate within this small pipe, we can move the disc using a pulley. The further the swing gate opens, the more water is allowed to flow in the main pipe. The swing gate is a little heavy, so a small amount of water won't be enough to open it. A certain amount of water is required to force the gate to open. The more water we have flowing in this small pipe, the further the valve opens and allows more and more water to flow in the main pipe. This is essentially how an NPN transistor works. You might already know that when we design electronic circuits, we use conventional current. So hey there guys, Paul here from the engineeringmindset.com. In this video, we're going to be looking at capacitors to